Welcome to an IEXIST podcast. Our entire mission can be summed up in one phrase: becoming all that we are. It is our belief that fulfillment doesn't come from changing into things you aren't, but rather from becoming everything that you already are. And ultimately, we're here to press and empower you to lead lives that are full of fulfillment. We've dedicated this specific podcast to the dream, not to having the dream or even talking about the dream, but to living the dream. The reality is that there's a stark difference between having a dream and manifesting one. Here you'll gain insight and wisdom keys directly from some of the water walkers of our generation, dream practitioners, those who have decided to tread paths where there were none, to step out into only what they could see. Come take a peek into the minds of some who, from within, create our world's most magnificent realities. I'm the creator and host, Bryan Pharr, and this is the Living the Dream podcast. All right, welcome to the 14th episode of Living the Dream, the podcast. I am your host, Bryan Pharr, and today I have a special one for you. I have a special guest. I am privileged to host a brother from another mother. We come from the same family, the same background. Life would have it that at some point we got separated unintentionally just due to life circumstances, and we reconnected some years ago. I've enjoyed talking to him. This conversation is a great one. It's really fitting for the times. It's really time sensitive, and I want you to take it as such. And without further ado, let's get straight into this new podcast entitled New Slaves, featuring brother, friend, and entrepreneur, Jamel Carpenter. So I've been thinking a whole lot lately about this idea of slavery, which is appropriately being brought up these days due to the highlighting of police brutality and systematic racism, overt racism, covert racism. But I'm not sure that people really understand the dynamics of what makes somebody a slave. And I think if they did, they would be surprised at who they could call slaves. Even as I'm talking to you, a song is coming to mind that Kanye West did called New Slaves. And without really remembering all of the lyrics, what I feel like he was essentially saying was that systematically, a lot of what actually made somebody a slave in terms of the picture you always get when you think about it, which is, physical, people out in the field, slaving over cotton and cleaning, quote unquote, master's house and being talked to any type of way, the whole shebang. However, people get that physical image of it. Even if you think about historic references in which people are building pyramids and being beat with whips while they doing it and being starved and ripped away from their families, all of that type of stuff, even to the full-on abuse that happens to people physically. I think what he was saying in the song is the whole new slave idea was that I may not be doing this to you in such a physical way that represents those pictures that you really remember, but I'm still maintaining that mentality in you. I'm still producing the same results, but making you think it's not the same because the picture doesn't look the same. The outward doesn't look the same, but you're still being taken advantage of in the same type of way. And so I think it's important because, again, this podcast is called Living the Dream. And my mission is to attack a lot of the subject matter that most people would skip over because coming from where I come from, and we're both Black males, living the dream in general, because of systematic racism and Black people in general have often been labeled and assumed to be and made to be looked at negatively. Because of all of those things, living the dream isn't as easy of a feat as, of course, it may be for people who have benefited from preferential treatment that went in their direction. There's this majority rule, I guess, that applies for everything. I was talking to my wife and I was telling her, think about it even in terms of a small organization. I'll use the church reference because people say it's the most divided time of the week. People work together way more than they go to church together on a normal basis, on a consistent basis. And no matter how you look at it, even if you want to say a church full of Black people, let's say you have 500 people in a Black church, and let's say 30 white people, a family and friends, came to the church, they started enjoying it, and so they started coming. 99.9% of the time, depending on who's in leadership, that's not going to affect the culture of the church at all, except maybe that you get some exposure to a potentially different culture, right? A different family culture, different ideology, stuff like that. But you're going to sing the same songs. You're going to worship, pray, whatever the external expression is. You're still going to do it the same. It's not going to change anything. Now, take that same church and let's say 250 white people start coming to the 500 black member church. Now we have a different scenario going on. And I guarantee you, by virtue of all of those people being in the room alone, you're going to have systematic change, right? You're probably going to start singing different songs. The culture of the church is going to start changing a little bit because you actually have to accommodate a big portion of your church now that may be coming from a different place, right? And so when you think about how America has consistently for a long time not hosted a large number of black people, you know, we were 12, 13%. Being that for so long, you're just a drop in an ocean almost. You know what I mean? Like there's still places you can go where you don't see any black people for a long time. You know, you go to certain places in America, and for some white people, seeing a black person might be like seeing a unicorn. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Literally, because of, again, the ratio, right? And when that's the case, nobody has to change, right? And so the internet has gifted us in the way of making the world a lot smaller than what it is. It's kind of cutting that majority rules situation a little early, because now you have to be faced with stuff that's across the world as if it's in your backyard, and there's no escaping that. And so it's kind of cutting down that time frame that I feel like it would take for America to consist of 35, 45, 50% black people, in which now the culture has to change. But other than that, if I don't got to see you, I'm not changing for you. And then if I see you a couple times, I'm still not changing for you. But at this point, you just have a whole different situation. And I know it seems like I'm all over the place, but I promise I'll connect them. So he's talking about new slaves, and the whole idea is that there are a lot of people who are still mentally slaves. And I almost want to take up for Kanye because I think a lot of people aren't saying this. Let me go ahead and say this, just because I know there's a lot of people whose views have been very narrow and very short on his statements, right? And I'm a connoisseur of conversation. That's why I like to have conversations. But one of the things that he's gotten in trouble for recently, you know, within the last couple years or so, is the idea that 400 years as a slave, wow, that sounds like a choice to me, is what he said, right? And people took that as, what do you mean slavery was a choice? These people came and they got us and they forced our ancestors onto boats and things like that. But I do want to clarify that statement for him, even though I'm not on PR for Kanye. He doesn't know me. I don't know him or anything like that. But what I heard when he said that was, let's say you're in a male and a female relationship, and the guy is not only mentally beating his wife down or girlfriend or whatever, right? Let's say it's just like a trophy wife situation in which he makes all the money. She's on the side collecting and being pretty for him, for the public. And he's beating her up constantly as far as mentally telling her stuff like, make sure you don't make me look bad and you need to get yourself together because I'm this and I'm that, you know, so it's kind of a mental abuse going on. But not only that, he's physically beating her, right? And so let's say this happens for 1 year and she didn't necessarily take him to be that type of guy when they first met. So 1 year into it, she's like, oh my God, I didn't know he was this person. This is crazy. He's beating me up. And you know in your heart that this isn't right, what's going on with you. But you're a little dependent, you know what I mean? Like you went into the relationship, he said he was going to take care of you, all this other stuff. So you stay around because you never really built anything for yourself. He caught you young, right? Now, let's say 3 years later, you're hoping things are going to get better and he's going to stop hitting you and you're going to be able to start doing things on your own. And I don't know, you're just thinking he's going to get better over time. So now you've been with him 4 years, and not only is he not getting better, on a certain level, it's getting worse. So let's go 5 years later. You're like, oh my God, I'm still in this. I don't even know how to get out now. But you know internally this is wrong the entire time. You having to be exposed to seeing other people who this doesn't happen to at all. You know what I mean? And the longer this goes on, you know, it's almost that idea of fool me once, fool me twice. It's my fault. You know what I mean? Because how long do you stay in it before you actually have to admit that you stayed because it was your choice? You understand what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So what he was saying was, I get it. They came over, they was real bad and all this other stuff. And, you know, I do know and believe that there were people who decided not to go in the first place. There were people who said, nah, you're gonna have to kill me. I'm gonna jump off this boat in the middle of the ocean and I'll take my chances because you not finna take me into no slavery. I see how y'all treat me and all this other stuff and my family and whatever. So they used the power of choice even then to say, I would rather die. You know, it brings me to that conversation in Black Panther when Michael B. Jordan was basically saying he would rather die than to join them at the time.
Right.
So they used the power of choice then. But let's say the rest of the people stacked on top of each other, defecating on each other, just a whole terrible experience. For some reason, felt like this is bad. I just got to survive, but this is going to get better one day. You know what I mean? Like, as soon as we get over here, I'm going to run free because I know this ain't right. Okay, but how many generations does this have to go is the point before you have to say that, yeah, I did. I saw them kill my brother. I saw them kill my mother. I saw them rip somebody apart. But how far does it have to go for you to admit that this lasted this long because we chose to stay in this predicament? Again, even if death was the only out, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He's like 400 years. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's just go back to the whole thing with the girl. All right, man, he was beating you the first year. Okay, I can see 4 or 5. You really tried to work through it. You know, he told you y'all were going to go to counseling and all this other stuff. But 50 years though?
Yeah.
How long do you get before you say, okay, I just chose to do it? You know what I mean? And so it's a complicated subject. I kind of like what TD Jake says about that too. He counsels married couples and things like that. And he was talking about how sometimes you'll talk to a person and say, man, you must be crazy. This person is treating you all bad and stuff like that. And he said what he figured out was what makes people stay around is people's good side. You know what I mean? And so, you know, the way I say it, there's always a little comfort in misery, just a little bit. You know what I mean? And so anyway, I'm getting into a whole bunch of stuff. I'm almost skipping over a lot of stuff that I even want to bring out already.
Well, codependent is the breeding ground for mental slavery, you know, and insecurity, all of that ties into what you're saying. And you got to have a lot of courage to be able to make a change in all your examples you are giving based on the young lady being in the relationship. I've seen it play out many times personally. And the problem has been that it stimulated from codependence and insecurity.
Wow.
The honest truth about it is a lot of people aren't that courageous enough to die rather than being a slave. And I use that in an analogy form. It's either death or liberty. And that's how I looked at things. And that's why I've been chastised a lot through my lifetime because, as my grandmama would say, I was too contrary, you know.
Yeah.
And for a long time, honestly, you know, and I'm talking late 20s, I never knew what that word really meant until one day, I don't know what led me to look it up, but I did, and it made sense for exactly the kind of person I am. But there's a cost for being free mentally, for sure, because again, like I said, it always puts you out to be the one that's the problem.
Absolutely. So, yeah, 2 great things we can pull out from this. I love the way you said it, that codependence is the breeding ground for slavery itself, and mental slavery is even the way you said it. And so I think what people have to understand is in order for anybody to be a slave, there's a reason why for so long, first of all, Black people had to be considered less than human or not human, you know, whether called monkeys or even when they decided, okay, let's free them up a little bit, but still dehumanize them. Let's call them 3/5 of a human just so we can get kind of a count of America, you know, but we're still not going to give them the quote unquote privilege. And it's not even a privilege, or we're still not going to allow them in our power to think that they're human. You know what I mean? But the reason somebody has to do that, not only for themselves, they do it for themselves so they can treat people bad. If I can think of you as an animal, right? If I can make myself feel like I'm not kin to you at all in terms of you not being a human, it's going to be much easier for me to do things to you that I would not do to my own mother, to my own sister, to my own brother. You know what I mean?
Degrade you.
Absolutely. So on one side, they do that, right? For that reason. But on the flip side of it, the only way I can really maintain your slavery is for you to be insecure, for you to think less of yourself. You know what I mean?
Correct.
You know, and so again, I'm pulling it out from the statement you made, but that's just the fact of the matter. And so when we really talk about this whole slavery thing, and I'm glad all of this stuff is being brought up now, but I also want to point out too, Black people ain't the only people slaves out here. You know what I mean?
No way.
And it's a big portion of why I wanted to have this conversation in the first place, because people look at it at such a physical level that they don't consider that there's way more slaves walking around today than we would actually even assume. Even the people that are high-minded enough to think that they aren't slaves because they didn't physically go through it with Black people, many of them not even knowing that they are still slaves to this day of a system that didn't even allow them to think enough for themselves to determine whether or not they wanted to treat Black people good or not. You know what I mean? It's such a much more broad thing than what people really consider.
Writer, producer, artist, coach, and inspirational motivational speaker, Bryan Pharr takes us on a deep, retrospective, and introspective journey ranging from his childhood until life today that invokes the question, will I live a life of significance or one of safety? Filled with experience-gained wisdom and revelatory insights, A New Home dares its readers to ask themselves the hard questions concerning their need to fit in. How far will you go? And will all the efforts you've made be worth it in the end? This perspective-shifting discourse is a must-read, and through its hard-hitting yet relatable, tear-jerking, and even at points comical nature may prove to be more of a life-changing event than just a good Sunday morning read. Get your physical copy today at becomingallthatweare.com.
I've met people who are in high position that are enslaved to the people that actually run their companies. If you're looking at it on a physical level, you're going to say that that's not possible, but it's very possible. Because what happens is if you get close enough to them or get close enough to their operation, you see the compromising of so many different things just to keep people around. And when you're talking about mental slavery, that is the perfect example, I think, that follows that word. Just because they are in a higher place does not mean that they are not enslaved to what's going on around them.
Absolutely. And so you're even talking about in corporate settings, in government, no matter where you see leadership, there can be leaders who are literally slaves to their organizations. And I've been in these organizations also. And when you walk in them, you don't even know who's running anything. The leader doesn't take any blame or any responsibility for anything. And neither do all of the people that are supposedly following this person. You know what I mean? And so you don't know where anything comes from. Oh, I didn't say that. You know, no, that's not. Oh, well, so-and-so said, you know, it's just a bunch of everybody's following each other. And it reminds me of the saying that the blind can lead the blind. You know what I mean? It's just like nobody knows where we're going because we're just in this system of trying to be something, again, which is birthed out of that insecurity that you're talking about. You know what I mean? And so the leader's insecure, it's breeding and only hosting insecure people. And so now everybody's following each other. Nobody knows what to do. You know, you're just copying and things like that. What I want to point out in this conversation is that too is a form of slavery. There are so many of you, so many people in the world who are literally so codependent, who have not had a singular self-thought. You know what I mean? Because this thing is systematic, right? And so, again, this goes for Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, Indian, European, whatever nationality, whatever group you think you come from. This is all over the world. But there's so many people who don't have a singular thought ever. You know what I mean? From the time you're born, it's mom and dad telling you what you should do based upon something they didn't even think about because it was a system they were born into. And so you're being given everything to do from the time you're born. And this is the career you should go after. And sometimes it's based primarily on money and not fulfillment and things like that. And so you go on through it and go through these schools sometimes that are indoctrinating you in the same type of way, because it's not a full history. It's not a full knowledge bank of even how to live life, which is what I'm going to be a part of solving in my lifetime, to be honest with you, through IEXIST. But it's not a full knowledge bank that helps and prepares you for life itself. It just puts you in a certain direction that's going to make you a new slave. right? And so then you get out of that. I'm thinking about this. I remember somebody saying one time, it's amazing that you go from being an 18-year-old or 17-year-old in grade 12 here in America, you graduate and you're supposed to start making life decisions for yourself when just the year before you had to raise your hand to go to the bathroom.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so
Absolutely.
now you go to college or higher education and, it's just another indoctrination a lot of times. And, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of things that people learn. I'm not saying it's all bad. If it was all bad, again, nobody would do it, but there is good in the system. And I don't think that the intention of everybody who created these systems was to enslave people. I'm just saying this is what this turns into, especially when you start integrating a lot of greed into it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So then you go from that into your job and you can be 50 years old and again, have never really had a single thought because you've been trained in religion, you've been trained in education, you've been trained in economics when it comes down to jobs and things like that. And what you don't realize is now you're 50 some odd years old. And from the time you were born, you've been told exactly what to wear, exactly what time to wake up, because you don't do that. Your job does that for you. Your school does that for you, whether it's uniforms or whatever. There's literally no liberty in most people's lives because, again, it's dress code. It's even societal norms that go into class, right? This is the house you're supposed to buy. This is where you're supposed to be by this time. Again, so you're never really thinking about these things. You're just getting filtered through systems. And again, it's not that the systems are always that bad or that you are able to say that your life was so bad because of these systems and things. It's just that the dependency on these systems was so strong that you never even questioned anything that was going on. And that's actually a problem because when we're talking about bettering the world, betterment for yourself, betterment for your family, there's no way to get outside of whatever has become the societal norm if you don't ever think for yourself.
Right.
And so, again, this mental slavery thing, it's a lot more broad than a lot of people would, I think, like to admit. It hits way more people than we even realize. And that is not to diminish overt systematic racism and things that are going on with specific groups here in America and around the world, such as Black people, such as a lot of times Hispanics, and really probably every group in some portion of the world. But I don't want people to escape the idea of really realizing that in many of these corporate situations and many of these churches and religious settings, there are more slaves among us today than anybody would ever know.
Yes, very well so.
I think it's the responsibility of light bearers, right? I think it's the responsibility of people who do actually step outside the frame to actually bring attention to these things, or else nothing grows, nothing ever progresses. People don't become free. People don't ever get out of these systems, even if it's affording you a lifestyle that you, quote unquote, can't complain about. You never get to freedom or betterment until you actually start thinking outside of the systematic rules that have been established for you before you even got into it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so one of the reasons I kind of bring my brother into the conversation is because we both know firsthand some of the traps that people fall into in a lot of these systems, in which there are people who are literally taking advantage of others. Again, in the same way that you might point out the example from the beginning where the guy was literally abusing the girl and doing it intentionally and actually playing games. I think that you can get into La La Land and you don't even realize that there are people literally playing with your life who can't wait for you to be fighting your peers in their organization. I'm talking about leaders that can't wait for you to be so competitive with each other that you're fighting one another for position and you're getting pinned against each other, and there's secret conversation going on in which it's causing the actual confrontations to happen. But it's also that I can avoid responsibility for anything that's going on. And people actually enjoy, again, this type of behavior because they have these people in mental holds, right?
Absolutely. Divide and conquer.
Wow.
That's exactly what you just explained. You got people attacking each other based on information that's being told from the middleman on each side to keep organizations upheld. And I'm telling you, it's a real thing.
Absolutely.
A lady told me once before, never met this lady, never seen her. I don't know why she stopped me, but it it's one of those moments where that grace just falls upon you, I guess. And
sure,
she told me everything that you want is right in your face, but you got to sit still to see it.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I didn't know what that meant at the time, but as months progressed, it was actually really profound for me. And once I sat still, I was able to see everything that was going on around me at the time, even in my past life. And that's the part that you got so much stuff going on, you can't even recognize actually what you're doing or how you're living, and that you might even be in a mental slave trap. And that's part of the capitalization of the whole idea and mentality of it, is to keep you moving so you can't see anything.
Absolutely. So you're saying essentially that the whole point of people keeping you busy and away from your family sometimes, but more so really sometimes even finding ways to entangle your family into whatever's going on, especially these days. The whole thing is it's a point of distraction is essentially what you're saying. So you don't have time to process your life at all.
Right.
So,
and what's actually occurring right in front of you.
Wow.
You know, there's a saying that, I don't know, it came to me one day, I heard it somewhere, I don't remember, but it basically goes that you cannot see the picture while you're in the frame.
Absolutely.
So what that essentially means is that as soon as you step out of the frame and start to look at the picture, you can see everything happening the whole time.
Absolutely. And so what you're saying is it's normalized slavery. Wow, man, this is making me want to talk about a lot of stuff. Woo, let's talk about it from this angle. Let's talk about the trap of isolation. First, when you said that, the way I saw it was if you never sit still long enough to really even comprehend what's going on around you and really even taking your inner feelings about the situation. Now, that's without any outside sources being involved. You can stay so busy that it distracts you from a lot of the potential mental slavery that could be active in your life. But there's a whole nother side to it too, which says that let me make sure I tell you never to listen to these people and never to go outside and never to be exposed to other things. It may come in forms in leaders downing everybody else that's a leader. You know what I mean? Oh, that dude's stupid. Oh, that guy is whatever.
Yeah, you're going into a real conversation, boy. Now you're getting into master manipulation.
Absolutely. And so downing everybody else except for their rule. And, you know, probably like Kanye, I remember he was saying in one conversation with his wife, she said he doesn't like anything. He was like, that's my specialty. I don't like anything. And so I can be very opinionated as a person too, if it's a lane that I involve myself into. So, right, because I'm a musician or a person that does music, there is a lot of music that I don't like because I would approach it from a certain angle myself. You know what I mean? And so I can be highly opinionated about music, for instance. And so, again, I get that. Even if you're a speaker or whatever lane you stay in, you know, if you're a business owner and the business is in your lane, you know, if you're great at anything, there's normally a level of competition that kind of goes into it, in which even if they inspire you, you're still going about it in a way to try to do it better than even the people that inspire you. You know what I'm saying? And so I don't want that to be confused with what we're talking about either. We're talking about literal, as you say, master manipulation, in which people do this intentionally in order to stop people from being able to see outside of their frame, because they get afraid that if you go see something better, you know, we're talking about doing it out of insecurity, right? Because they're afraid if you go see something better, then they'll lose you. And so what they do is literally down everybody else. They tell you not to go over here because it's unhealthy, and they just try to cut off
Convince you.
Convince you.
This is the best place.
Ooh.
You won't find a better place, is what they will convince you to keep you in place.
Absolutely. And again, they'll normalize this and they'll make you think you're wrong or make you feel guilty if you don't think this is the right place or the proper place or the best place for you to be, and go into any measures necessary in order to accomplish that perspective in you, even if you don't even feel like it's right.
Absolutely.
Just to keep you from getting outside of the frame, right?
Yes, correct. Man, they cultivate the environment. It's thought out thoroughly. It is masterminded, and it's a whole system that's created to keep you enslaved mentally on many levels. I mean, if we want to be honest, it's in the athletic world.
Absolutely.
It's in the religious world.
Absolutely.
Business world.
Absolutely.
It's prevalent in almost everything in society.
Politics.
You know, yeah.
And normally, to be honest with you, it's like this money rules thing, right? Anything that greed can be forced into, it's literally involved. And so you can't really escape it because, you know, I was talking to you earlier and talking about how religion itself, the way I see it, is the business of God, right? And what happens a lot of times is that actually contaminates any message you're supposed to get. Because once a greedy person gets involved and all of this manipulation starts happening, and, you know, you just got the guy that wanted to impress the 5 friends that thought he was a loser in 8th grade.
Oh, man.
Once he gets involved into it, now it's about a whole different thing. And now he ripping you off of your money and all this other stuff just to impress people. You know what I'm saying? And when your spirituality was supposed to be heightened in these places, you end up serving a king who just wants to show off.
Yes.
For a bunch of people.
That's correct. Well, I'll tell you, the best thing to do is ask them what's next. If they can't tell you, then that's a problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just start asking questions. That's another thing we have been trained and conditioned to do, is not to ask questions, just to follow along. But I've just always had the intuition that that's not really the right thing to do. And again, I've been chastised for asking questions, you know?
Absolutely.
For wanting better understanding of what is actually happening, what's going on, what are we actually doing. And this is when you get ostracized. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And they put you in a position to where you're the problem, and, you know, they make sure everybody around you know that you're the problem also.
Wow. Absolutely. Turn people against you.
Absolutely.
That was New Slaves, Part 1, featuring Jamel Carpenter. I really hope you enjoyed the information. Wow, we're in a new day, and I really know what we're presenting to you will become very vital information, if not already, then in the very near future. And I hope that all of you who need it will be able to apply the information and principles we bring across in these episodes, in this series. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so by sharing it, leaving a rating. Also, just give me a feedback. You can connect with me on social media. And also, if you want to partner with us on a monthly basis to continue to grow the platform and allow us to do some bigger and better things, not only for the podcast itself, but for the IEXIST brand, which if you follow me personally on social media, you'll get to know a lot more about that whole thing. You can do so at patreon.com/Bryan Pharr. As always, I pray that your way is made prosperous. And until next time.